Pandemic, from when we had pandemic, I now teach up at Griffith University. I look after the games design course up there. And I also fell into this weird producing role for the ABC, making a serious game. Long story.
Hi everyone, I'm McCrea, head of the Games and Interactivity program at Swinburne University of Technology. This is about 10 or 15 students of mine in this room. Hi. And this is, I guess, this is a really good city for game design with a whole bunch of game design schools. So it's like a massive centre of game studentship and game design. So I guess Swinburne is a part of that.
Hi, I'm Malcolm Ryan. I teach at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, and one of my students came all the way down, so that's... yeah, and I've been teaching game design for about 5 years.
Hi, I'm Peter Henry. I'm a gameplay programmer here in Melbourne at Infinite Interactive. We make mostly puzzle games, and I'm hoping to give more of a development side to these ideas.
And 3 of my students are here.
My name's Helen Stuckey. I teach at RMIT University in the Games program. I was previously the Games curator up at the Australian Centre for the Moving Image, and we have a PowerPoint, which is the most basic PowerPoint in the world, which someone decided not to load. So basically this session is the education session, but it's inspired by an architecture book called 101 Things I Learned at Architecture School by Frederick Wright, which is really, I should be holding it now so I can wave it at you, but unfortunately I left it at home. It's a very beautifully designed little book that just goes through a whole series of like rules and common sense that designers use every day in architecture. So it's a whole sort of the things that you learn but you don't learn as part of curriculum when you're learning how to be the practice of a designer. So simple things like, philosophies like less is more, less is more. That winter people are wider than summer people. That columns are not just structural, they're also about how you shape space. So what we did is we put an invitation out that was answered by the panel in relation to thinking about those things that actually are the design rules, design principles, and the kind of concepts that you use all the time in your practice that are taught at design school, but are taught kind of in between the lines rather than as part of the curriculum. And we actually put a list of over 300, which was pretty impressive. Matt, in about 15 minutes, came up with 101 on his own. It was quite awesome. Some of them were quite amusing. So we might just start with the first one, even though we don't have the slide.
That's awesome. Can everyone read this?
It's such a great list that I'll talk to Paul about how we can actually put it up on the Freeplay website at the end.
Alright,
We just do the yellow ones.
Alright, so let's just begin with one that's very popular at the moment, and one that was suggested by Paul Callahan. One of our hosts for today. Define the verbs of the game. Who wants to go first? Define the verbs of the game. Okay. So, well, Paul, maybe you can stand up and start screaming. But basically,
I teach with Paul, and Paul is constantly saying this to our students who will do a big introduction to what their game is about, but they will absolutely not define what the player is doing moment to moment. So it's really necessary to understand the verbs of your game. So what the player is actually doing. Is the player jumping? Is the player exploring? These things are so essential. And they're often the things that particularly students are not focused on. They're focused on the world, the environment, the big narrative. So verbs, take it away.
This point goes back to the whole concept that games are about action. And if you can define what your individual moments of action are and what a player does in that action, and you whittle it down, you cut it all down to base elements, then it's those elements that fundamentally they're your verbs. Okay? And when you have the list, and it shouldn't be a massive massive list. It should be kind of contained. Then all of the decisions that you make about what occurs in the game, what happens at this point, how does the player get to here, or we need to do something, what do we do, it should all reference back to those verbs. Because that's kind of how you get it consistent.
Yes, one of the things that I see a lot is that when you say it should be a small set of verbs, I see programmers particularly saying, so we need another action, just give the player another thing to do and another thing, then your set of verbs just grows and grows and grows. An elegant game is one that is whittled down to just a very small set. You think about the game of Go, there's always one I refer back to. There's really only one verb you can do there, which is put a stone in one location, but that verb has so many meanings depending on the context of how it's applied. So rather than have a lot of context specific, in this case I do this, in this case I'll put these verbs, just to whittle it down to a nice, elegant set.
Well, let's move on to the next one, because we've got some really interesting topics to deal with. So number 2, prototype as fast as you can. Throw it away once you know it works.
I think this one's very important for you. You have to get your ideas out and see if they actually work. Sometimes you can spend too long iterating over a particular idea, and what suffers is the rest of the game because you're not moving on to the other parts.
Look at that font work. Who's that?
Again, people spend too much time thinking of, in my class, I get them to make board games just as starting exercise, and tell them, play fast, fail fast, make something you can play as soon as possible and play, and they still sit there and think, well, if you add this rule, this rule, this rule, they've got this massive set in their head that they're going around and around. I say, no, just make the first part of that, play it, see whether it works, because you can build this enormous, complicated beast in your head, and if you never play it, you'll never know what it does.
For me, it's also about the principle of cultivation as practice, is that you understand that you are building a skill set as you're building games, and that if you're making several things at once, you have to save files every 20 seconds, and you have to build a bunch of things really quickly, inevitably it begins to self-edit, and that is included in any practice, but especially one that's so labour-intensive and will have high risks if you persist on an idea that you don't even believe in.
Incidentally, there was a really good talk by the Super Brothers guys at GDC, and it was up on Boing Boing. Get to the rock. Or let's talk more rock. And it was a really beautifully illustrated point that people talk about games a lot, they write about games a lot, and then they have to kind of make the game. So the talking's great, the writing's great, but fuck all that, just start making. And that's that was the point.
And paper prototyping, anything you can do quickly and efficiently, that's it before you actually have to put a lot of energy into producing assets is always ideal. And everybody loves programmer art.
They don't, it's a lie.
Okay. Player has a brain, let them use it.
Yeah. There's an awful lot of assumption. There was many years ago in a company that I previously worked at, there was the whole concept of the tutorial level, and it's a platforming game. When you start the game, you obviously have to give a person a tutorial because, oh my god, we can never assume that a person knows anything. So there was this guiding of the player through this kind of step, through this initial level, where a lot of effort was put into it. So, all right, well, first you have to learn about this, and then you have to learn about that, and then you have to learn about that. And it's a very valid sort of way to do it. It's a great kind of way to okay, let's all get up to speed. Okay, good, now we can play the game. But you shouldn't overdo that. Because people are intelligent, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're not morons. So if you treat it if you treat the player with the respect that they can bring their own knowledge to the game to kind of figure it out, then the player can invest themselves more in that game.
Since we're talking about trust, we can probably move to the next one and talk about them together as well. So trust is the most important thing next to respect. I think just from my perspective, this is important because games are hugely, because they're so labour intensive, it's about a massive act of generosity. So it's making culture, but it's also doing something that requires a great deal of risk on your behalf. That's inherently a generous act. So that, when it's visible and you see a game that's made with love and it implies love in the player, that's so much more satisfying than a kind of simple little frame. It's kind of closed off little act of code that's working together. The difference is that it's massive acts. The difference between books and computer games, when you see a game just specifically made and a game made with love, it's that difference again. So.
Can I just add one point? Because I wrote this one. Originally, I wasn't actually thinking about games. I was thinking about game development. And in my experience, when you work in a team of people where everybody is really, really focused on this one product, the best teams come out of this mutual trust, where you trust that the person working next to you loves the product as much as you do. And you kind of have to have this respect between the people on the team, and that gives you this kind of best case scenario of the team. And the other reason why I think that this is fundamentally important is I've seen what happens when people don't trust members of the team, or management doesn't trust people to perform at a decent, we're all adults kind of level. You get this like really poor workplace. Oh, we have a question. Oh, can we have a question?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually have a third interpretation of this, which is that when you play a game, because the experience is completely mediated by whoever wrote it, you have a lot of trust that they will respect the time that you invest in it and deliver like things like your saving you'll be able to get to the end or clearly explain why you couldn't. You have a satisfying. All of those things are just essential in the experience of feeling that the game is treated with respect.
But it's not wasting your time, and it's often a rewarding experience, and that it respects your intelligence.
More than any other sort of medium, games require the player to put in work. So, I mean, in a film, we can, there is still the same thing happens, say, in a film where it's, twisty film, you're trying to keep all the elements there, and then you realise that in the end, the director didn't close off some part of the story, and you've been maintaining that in your head all this while, and then you feel dissatisfied. It's all the worse in a game where you're actually putting all this effort into playing it, and then if the game designer doesn't reward your play in some well. That's real happiness instead.
Yeah, the library people have got, if they do need an extra one, they say they can, because they've got to, something's turn it off.
There's a number of ways to interpret it, so would you give the program really?
Red barrel should explode.
It's pretty straightforward. Put a red barrel in the game.
I would say this one's very important. I've seen this in focus testing. If you put something in there and the player expects it to behave a certain way and it doesn't, it kind of confuses them. Which is not to say that you should experiment or force the player to think about their actions, but if you're using something as obvious as a red barrel, it should explode.
Every game designer should read Donald Norman's book, The Designer's Everyday Thing. It talks about how the shape of something speaks to what it does. And a doorknob, different kinds of doorknobs will say pull or push. And you can put a big sign there saying pull, but if it's a push doorknob or vice versa, people will do the wrong thing. And it's not that they're stupid or that they can't read, it's that the doorknob speaks more loudly than the words. And so in your game, you've got to realise that everything speaks to how it's going to be used. And a red barrel says, I will blow up. And you can deliberately mislead the player in that way for effect if you want, but don't just blindly mislead them and not realise that the player's expecting one thing and you're doing another. Now one thing, putting a red barrel in that doesn't explode deliberately so that the player, shoots at it and, why isn't this stupid barrel exploding? If that's what you want, that's